As my eyes swept over him, his own were fixed on me. From across the room they seemed black as night, staring up under thick, equally black eyebrows, one of them lifted in a curve that suggested a question mark. His face was indeed striking. All distinct planes and surfaces, with high-angled cheekbones meeting brows that shielded and shadowed his eyes. Above his chin was one of the few places where there was room for softness. His wide mouth, which, like his long hands, didn't seem to make sense. But the most unnerving thing about him was not his physical perfection. It was his feral combination of strength, agility, and keen intelligence that was palpable across the room. In his black trousers and soft gray sweater, with a shock of black hair swept back from his forehead and cropped close to the nape of his neck, he looked like a panther that could strike at any moment, but was in no rush to do so. He smiled. He smiled. It was a small, polite smile that didn't reveal his teeth. I was intensely aware of them anyway, sitting in perfectly straight, sharp rows behind his pale lips. The mere thought of teeth sent an instinctive rush of adrenaline through my body, setting my fingers tingling. Suddenly, all I could think was, get out of this room. Now. The staircase seemed farther away than the 4 steps it took to reach it. I raced down to the floor below, stumbled on the last step, and pitched straight into the vampire's waiting arms. Of course, he had beaten me to the bottom of the stairs. His fingers were cool, and his arms felt steelier than flesh and bone. The scent of clove, cinnamon, and something that reminded me of incense filled the air. He set me on my feet, picked notes and queries off the floor, and handed it to me with a small bow. Dr. Bishop, I presume? Shaking from head to toe, I nodded. The long, pale fingers of his right hand dipped into a pocket and pulled out a blue and white business card. He extended it. Matthew Claremont. I gripped the edge of the card, careful not to touch his fingers in the process. Oxford University's familiar logo, with the 3 crowns and open book, was perched next to Claremont's name, followed by a string of initials indicating he had already been made a member of the Royal Society. Not bad for someone who appeared to be in his mid to late 30s, though I imagined that his actual age was at least 10 times that. As for his research specialty, it came as no surprise that the vampire was a professor of biochemistry and affiliated with Oxford Neuroscience at the John Radcliffe Hospital. Blood and anatomy, 2 vampire favorites. The card bore 3 different laboratory numbers, in addition to an office number and an email address. I might not have seen him before, but he was certainly not unreachable. Professor Claremont. I squeaked it out before the words caught in the back of my throat, and I quieted the urge to run screaming toward the exit. We've not met, he continued in an oddly accented voice. It was mostly Oxbridge, but had a touch of softness that I couldn't place. His eyes, which never left my face, were not actually dark at all, I discovered, but dominated by dilated pupils bordered with a gray-green silver of iris. Their pull was insistent, and I found myself unable to look away. The vampire's mouth was moving again. I'm a great admirer of your work. My eyes widened. It was not possible that a professor of biochemistry would be interested in 17th century alchemy, but it was not impossible that a professor of biochemistry would be interested in 17th century alchemy, but it seemed highly unlikely. I picked at the collar of my white shirt and scanned the room. We were the only 2 in it. There was not one at the old oak card file or at the nearby bank of computers. Whoever was at the collection desk was too far away to come to my aid. I found your article on the color symbolism of alchemical transformation fascinating, and your work on Robert Boyle's approach to the problems of expansion and contraction were quite persuasive, Claremont continued smoothly, as if he were used to being the only active participant in a conversation. I've not yet finished your latest book on alchemical... Take 3. I've not yet finished your latest book on alchemical apprenticeship and education, but I'm enjoying it a great deal. Thank you, I whispered. His gaze shifted from my eyes to my throat. I stopped picking at the buttons around my neck. His unnatural eyes floated back to mine. You have a marvelous way of evoking the past for your readers. I took that as a compliment, since a vampire would know if it was wrong. Claremont paused for a moment. Might I buy you dinner? My mouth dropped open. Dinner? I might not be able to escape from him in the library, but there was no reason to linger over a meal, especially one that he would not be sharing, given his dietary preferences. I have plans, I said abruptly, unable to formulate a reasonable explanation of what those plans might involve. Matthew Claremont must know I was a witch, and I was clearly not celebrating Mabon. That's too bad, he murmured, a touch of a smile on his lips. Another time, perhaps. You are in Oxford for the year, aren't you? Being around a vampire was always unnerving, and Claremont's clove scent brought back the strange smell of Ashmole 782. Unable to think straight, I resorted to nodding. It was safer. I thought so, said Claremont. I'm sure our paths will cross again. Oxford is such a small town. Very small, I agreed, wishing I had taken leave to London instead. Until then, Dr. Bishop, it has been a pleasure. Claremont extended his hand. With the exception of their brief excursion to my collar, his eyes had not drifted once from mine. I don't think he had blinked either. I steeled myself not to be the first to look away.